I am so excited today. I'm going to be talking with Chef James Barry. Now, James has 20 years in the culinary field and started as a private chef, cooking for celebrities such as Tom Cruise, George Clooney, oh my goodness, Barbara Streisand, John Cusack, amongst many others. And in addition to being a culinary chef for these amazing high profile people, he is also the CEO and founder of the Oregon based superfood seasoning Pluck. And I've got this right here. Now, Pluck is made up of organ meats. And so he basically took the nutrition of organ meats and put it into a seasoning. As many of you may know, a lot of the seasonings that we have that we put on our food are full of a bunch of crap. So this is a solution to that. I want to ask him a lot about this. I also want to talk to him about his experiences in the culinary field. So we're going to jump in. We're also going to talk about some motivational stuff and inspirational stuff. We're going to have just an all-out, relaxed, chill conversation. So it is my pleasure to introduce Chef James Barry. Chef James Barry.
Tricia.
Do you know how excited I am to have you here? Okay, here's the thing, right? I'm a naturopathic doctor and you hear me talk about health all the time. And someone's probably like, Tricia, you're bringing on a chef? Like, what are we going to talk? A chef that plays with organ meats? Aren't you like basically vegan? Like, what is going on? And I want to say, I have so many questions for you on so many different levels today that I found myself sitting here going, oh my gosh, what are we even going to open with? Like, I've listened to so many interviews of you and your stories already. And seriously, everyone listening, this is going to be a pivotal episode because food matters, number one, right? It matters for our health, and it's something that we can actually control. Most of our lives go without control, but we can control what we put in our mouth. We can control how we take care of ourselves. So I want to dive in with this. And I think one of the most natural places to really start with you is I find that most people who create amazing things usually have a point in their life where they went, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do this instead. And something changed their mindset or changed their being that allowed perhaps tragedy to become growth, or that really changed their perspective. And I know this happened to you because you used to be an actor, right?
Yeah.
So let's dive in. How are you a chef and not an actor? Can we talk about that first?
It's so funny because I have always felt like I'm more than just one person. Like, so almost like there's a duality happening. And I felt it when I was a kid. And honestly, I felt it between my parents because they felt so different. My dad was very kind of disciplined and very, very kind of a product of his generation, very stern and disciplined and had emotions but didn't express them, whereas my mom was all emotions, right? And so I constantly felt like chaotic because of that. Yet I also think it supported a duality in me. And so in many ways, I I was just thinking about this today. I was like, what if everything that has happened in our lives, the challenges, the successes, what if they're all connected? And we just can't feel it in the moment. But yet when we look back at them, we go, oh my gosh, if I had not said yes or no to that, I wouldn't have eventually gotten to this. And I was literally trying to connect the dots between my acting passion and pursuit to where I am now. And what's so interesting is that if you were to say, so where do you want to be in, let's say 10 years?
Mhm.
I would probably answer you, I actually want to be in a writer's room writing for like a TV show. Like
You can
in
write
10
for
years.
mine.
Like literally, I would probably say that because I still feel passionate about creativity. I still actually do want to, I don't want to necessarily act anymore, but I do want to create. I have ideas for stories. I have ideas for shows that I want to tell. And that's never gone away. Yet at the same time, I am so grateful to be on this path as a chef. And I and I think I had to go down the path of being an actor to come back to a passion and an interest I've had since I was 7, which was cooking. I
Yeah.
just didn't know. I didn't know that I could have a career as a chef. I didn't know that this path was possible, the one I've been on. I just didn't know. And so a lot of these points that I now look back at and I'm trying to connect the dots to, but a lot of these points are all dictated by what is it I know in the moment? Like what we know, we only know what we know.
Every decision that we make is based on the information that we have at the time. Yet I find that so many of us beat ourselves up for some decision we made because when we move forward in life, we look and say, oh, we should have known better. We should have seen that coming. You don't know.
You
All you
don't
can
know.
do is face with, have the experience that you have and make that decision. And I think about how much we could just let go in our lives if we just let that idea that we did it wrong or we went the wrong way. I grew up in the modeling industry and acting industry as well, and it's an
I didn't
interesting,
know
like,
that.
you know, you
I
did.
didn't know that. I
Yeah.
mean, you're
So
beautiful, so it doesn't surprise me, but I didn't know that.
yeah. So my mom was a Janssen Smile Girl, which was like the Victoria's Secret models of the '60s, and my dad worked for Sunset Films, and he was a photographer amongst advertising and other things. And they met and had this big courtship where they were all traveling the world, working, and got married, had me, plopped me right in front of the camera. I mean, the minute I was out, it was like, Tricia is front of the camera. So I did my first commercials for the Bon Marché department store when I was an infant. I crawled across the screen in baby clothes all the way through my childhood. Fast forward to being 11 or 12 years old and being booked with a large fashion agency at 6 feet tall, 100 pounds, and 12. 12. I have a 13-year-old right now. And I'm like, could he have handled a business right now? Like, and I look at what you get thrown into in that world, especially when you're in a younger age, as my entire identity was built off what everyone else told me I was. And I loved being on stage and I loved being in front of the camera because I could be somebody else. I didn't have to be me. I didn't have to really, truly be Tricia. And fast forward to my adult years, it wasn't until really I had so much grief, loss of my parents, loss of that community that I grew up with, that I start to go, oh my gosh, I have no idea who I am.
Mm.
Who am I supposed to be and who's watching and how am I going to connect with that and be my authentic self? And that's kind of where the show came out of. It's like I look around and I go, how many people live their lives based on everyone else's expectations and never really honing in on who they truly are and the light that we are given as a gift for whatever our path may be. Some people find it and recognize, like you're saying, the path that they've been on and how it's led them to other people. And so many people get stuck, right? So yeah, so I've been a runway model, still am, but I was with Ford Models for many years. Officially kind of somewhat retired last year, although I still do shows occasionally. Still 6 feet tall, certainly not 12. And but it's been a really interesting experience just starting to figure out who I am, especially as I hit my 40s and I became a mom and I started to think about legacy and I started to think about health and I started to think about, when I die, because both my parents died young. Um,
How old?
yeah, my dad was 59. He had a
Uh,
stroke, went downstairs, opened the fridge to get breakfast, and fell to the ground. And that was it. He didn't wake up that morning and say, I'm going to have a stroke today. Or the day before, he didn't say, this is the last day of my life, right? He didn't know. And my mom battled with cancer, and I was there to assist her through that. Um, and I imagine that most successful people, including yourself, have stories like this, moments where something in life kind of derails you from where you are. And that duality you're talking about, I totally get. I'm a Gemini, first of all. Are you a Gemini?
I'm a Sag.
Okay, well, we're kindred spirits, right? These
Hmm.
multiple, but where was that in your life? Did you have moments like that where you were just like, "Oh my gosh, like life is so precious. Why am I doing what I'm doing or what does this mean?"
I I did not. have the perspective I have now. Like I have a much more spiritual, much more like, oh, life is happening for me, not against me perspective. When I was a kid, I didn't really piece things together. Like I was very emotional, but I did not think that there was a bigger plan for me. I didn't, I just, and to this day, when I, have, like when I start to feel the manifestations happen, I get really verklempt because I think I feel that little boy in me who didn't, who had dreams but didn't know they were possible. And so I feel that in me in those moments of going, oh my gosh, see, they are possible. And I get so emotional. And it's, I don't even know who I'm talking to in the moment, but inside myself, I hear a voice say, like, see, you could do it. And I look at, like, I think about this story I once heard just recently from a friend who has, he's three of the house, I think it's either two or three of the houses he's lived in have both burned down. And they were completely random. It wasn't like fires, you know, that we just experienced in LA, but like they just randomly burnt down. And I said, "Well, how is that? Does that feel good? Because like sometimes I wish I lost everything so I could just start over because I sometimes feel the weight of all these the things I've collected over the years, right?" And he's like, "Well, here's the thing. When you choose to lose that kind of stuff, that's great because it's a choice. But when it happens to you and you didn't choose it, it's not fun." And I was like, "Oh yeah, duh, of course. Like you didn't choose both your houses to burn down." And I think that that is really the difference between when we look at our lives or how we experience our lives. Like, is is this thing that you're moving towards, is it something that feels like on mission of like why am I here? And then, or does it feel like, no, this is happening to me and I don't want it, you know? Like, am I fighting this or am I accepting this? And for me, I was not one of those kids that was like, I'm an actor, look at me. Just like you were kind of thrust into that, I was very much thrust out of it. Like it wasn't even a part of my sphere. I used to sing and dance with my next door neighbor. We would sing like Grease tunes and we would have a lot of fun, but I didn't equate the behavior we had as like, oh, this means you want to be an actor. Like, because there was no one modeling that for me. So I just thought we're just gregarious, having fun, creative kids. And I see it in my younger daughter now. She's always using her imagination. It doesn't mean she should be an actor or a model or whatever. She's just an imaginative kid. And so that's how I was. And it wasn't until I got to high school and they were doing the play Grease. And I didn't even know that the play and the movie were different. I thought they were the same thing. I didn't have any idea of plays, movies, writing. I didn't understand all that stuff. I just saw, whoa, they're putting on the play Grease. I love Grease. I'm going to audition and I'm just going to hold a light if I don't get a part. Like, I just want to be a part of it. I don't even know what being a part of it means.
Yeah.
And so I showed up. The reason I was so nervous, but a friend told me, I will go too. And she was someone who had already done plays, so she was a little bit more experienced. But she's like, I will go and I'll support you. Well, she never showed up. I was waiting outside
Friend.
the door and she wasn't there. And I was like, okay, what do I do? And they came out and they said, are you ready? And I was like, I guess I am. And I just went in and I just pretended I was in the I pretended I was that young kid singing in his backyard. And I just got lost in it, had a great time. I sang this song, Beauty School Dropout,
Yeah.
and then I left. And I left with a smile. I was like, "Oh, that was fun." And I didn't think about that I was doing it in front of people. I didn't think about, "Oh, the pressures, am I going to get the part?" Cuz I didn't care. I just needed to do this because I wanted to be a part of it. And then I find out that I got the Danny Zuko part. And people were freaking out. They're like, "You've never acted in your life. How are you doing this?" And then I later find out that my mom and dad were so nervous for me, and I didn't know this, but they like showed up at one of the dress rehearsals to make sure that I was actually okay, because they were inviting everyone in the neighborhood, and they were like, what are they going to see? Like, I hope we didn't just like invite them over to like amateur hour, that kind of thing. And so it was this phenomenal discovery of like, oh, what is this? This is exciting. I felt more free on that stage than I've ever felt in my life. And I felt tapped into something that I didn't understand. So then the next few years became a pursuit of like, what is this? And
Mhm.
I went to acting classes, and I eventually kept pursuing it. And it grew and grew until it was like literally the thing I was pursuing. But here's what's interesting. I always didn't feel like this was fully my calling. I felt like I was like, well, once I become a famous actor or a successful actor, meaning I'm making money from it, that's kind of how I was defining success at the time. Then I'm going to take that money and I'm going to do A, B, C, D with it. Like I'm going to write a book, or I'm going to then help people like with their lives, or invest in these other ideas. Like I always saw it as a stepping stone, which is bizarre because most people don't see acting as a stepping stone to something, to more things where you're kind of helping the world more. They actually see it as like, no, this is the end. And if I have a lot of money, then great. But I didn't. And that's kind of what woke me up, was like, why am I waiting to do all these other things until the acting hits? Why don't I just go do the other things?
Yeah. And I think tapping into your creativity is so important because as kids, we just walk into the audition. You just do it. As an adult, we sit there and hum and haw about it. What are they going to think of me? Do I have the time? We put all these limiting beliefs on ourselves. But if we do tap into how we were as children, I had a very similar story to you. I got Snow White, my first audition ever. And my mom was like, how did you do that monologue? Like, where did that come from? Like, I'd never seen you do that before. And I was 13, right? Or 12 or 13, similar type of thing. But as an adult, we don't always do that, right? But if you tap into the creativity, and I talk about this a lot when I talk about stress and stress management and people that are stuck in their lives and trying to be something that their brain says they should be, but they don't take the time to really connect with who they were as a kid. I went back to dance when I was at my lowest because that's what I loved to do when
Mhm.
I was a kid. I just turned on music. My dad played guitar. I would dance around the house. I used to put on dance shows for my parents all the time, and those types of things made me happy. And so I think I agree with you that so many people, when they act or they get into the entertainment industry, they think this is my career, this has to be my career. But what if it's just the inspiration for you to really download, your true gifts and be on a higher frequency so that you can actually do what you want to do? And you love to cook, right? And
Totally.
I read or heard you somewhere that you used to be like specialize in vegan and vegetarian cooking, which is a total 180 from Pluck, which I absolutely want to talk about in a second because I actually have it right here.
Ah.
Little plant-based person here has it. But I know there was a switch for you, right? Between really looking at vegan cooking or looking at plant-based cooking, which I think is a great way to learn how to cook, by the way, because if you can make vegetables taste good, you can make anything taste good. And coming from someone who's plant-based that goes to restaurants and I'm like, well, what are your vegan options? And they're like, well, here's grilled carrots and asparagus,
Yeah.
with olive oil. And I'm like sitting there starving. I may be a model, but I do love to eat. In fact, food is one of my favorite subjects because I think we nourish our souls and our minds with food. We have control over what we eat and we want it to taste good because when it tastes good, we have these amazing experiences through our senses. And I think when you're a vegan chef, you really can hone in on what are those flavors and those things that you have to bring into something that's seemingly bland to most people. So, can you talk to me a little bit how you progressed as a chef, in plant based versus coming to organ meats, which I would love to introduce my audience to? I'm going to give you the mic. How did this get here?
Yeah. So I didn't plan to be a chef. I didn't even know that was an option. Yet I loved cooking as a kid. I loved this gourmet cooking class I took in junior high. Loved it. I like so much. That teacher meant so much to me. I even still remember her name, Marilee Dunn. And And then I didn't pursue it because I didn't know it could be a career. I just wanted something different. I didn't want to own a restaurant and work late nights. I saw myself even at a very young age as a family person and wanting to be with my family at night. And so until it was like really it was 9/11. So 9/11 happened and everything like that is our generation's Pearl Harbor. Like
Oh, yeah,
hands down. Like
hands down.
that is where world issues came home to roost. And it was like, "Oh my gosh, life could end any moment." And it doesn't matter if you're 17, 7, 30, 80. It doesn't matter, right? And I think most of the world it lives that always. But in America, we feel like, oh, wars and domestic things on domestic soil are just that's the thing that's on TV or in movies. And it's like that brought it home. And I was just like, you know what? I only want to pursue that which is heart based moving forward. And so I that's when I was like researching and kind of thinking about, well, what did I love as a kid? Because that's going to be closest to my essence. I
Mhm.
jumped into the acting, or sorry, the cooking world. I went to culinary school in New York. This school I went to, they taught you everything, but they specialize in vegan, vegetarian food. And leading up to me going to that culinary school, I started to experience kind of experiment with different diets. So I had tried going vegan and I was eating lots of soy.
Yeah.
I started eating lots of chicken at one point and I was just kind of like finding like how do I eat? What makes my body thrive?
Mhm.
And by the time I got to that culinary school, I had experienced eating vegan food. I had experienced kind of what you said, how plain it is.
Mhm.
And but I also realized I'm like, oh, a lot of people eat this way. And I'm like, this would be an advantage if I'm entering the culinary field as a private chef. If I have this under my belt, I'll be more hireable. Like I
Yeah.
will I will be kind of even of higher value because not all chefs can, to your point, can cook like that.
Yeah.
So and make it delicious and craveable. And so that's why I focused on it in the school. I was never fully vegan though, but I was using it as an edge and it really did help. I mean, I I was able to not only be the vegan vegetarian chef on the Vans Warp Tour because of it, but I also was able to really look at the culinary field and bring things to it that I think a lot of my peers weren't thinking because they were so trained in a very specific way of cooking. Because I was really coming at it as someone who's older, who didn't want to be a restaurant chef, I was like always thinking outside the box, like combining things that most people wouldn't combine, because maybe in a sense, because I wasn't trained as exclusively as they were. But I will say, though, that what's fascinating is that the diet thing for me, the
Mhm.
trends have never been of interest. I find trends to be fleeting, and I find them to be actually distractions from what really matters. For me, what the trend, and I'm using air quotes, but the trend is just eat real food. That to me is like all I've really focused on. And even as a chef, what distinguished me the most was that I took real food and that's what I use to like thicken sauces or to flavor things instead of adding fillers and stabilizers and lots of things that the industry would do. Like they would be adding, like if they were trying to thicken a dressing, they might add sometimes flour, they might add starch, they might add sugar. I would use real food. Like I would blend carrot into it. I
Uh,
would roast cauliflower and I would blend that to thicken it. I would use dates instead of sugar. And all this stuff is like what people are doing now, but I was doing this 20 years ago when
yeah.
no one was doing it
Mhm.
except for the really uber trained vegan chefs. Those were the only people incorporating these kind of foods into meals in an interesting way. No one else was doing this.
It's it's crazy. And yeah, you're right. It's so common now. But when you were talking about fad diets and diets, one of the things that I recognized in the modeling world, and I'm curious to see if you have a similar experience working for very well-known people, is that, as a kid, I would look up to these models. They're in these beauty magazines, and I'd be like, oh, they must just like love themselves, and they must eat so perfectly, and they must like have it all figured out, right? And then when I started to meet them, I realized, number one, they put on their pants just like I do. They have just as many insecurities as I do. They're not perfect. And a lot of them were not living healthy lifestyles. A lot of it was artificial, or it was them going through a fad diet. I remember the grapefruit juice diet, which was a huge thing when I was modeling in the 90s, was how fast can you lose this weight? Or, as we moved more into the 2000s, the lemon juice with
Master cleanse.
cayenne and,
Yep. Remember the master
all these
cleanse?
different things that we would take to lose weight quickly. And the focus was always very much on weight as a measure
Yeah.
of success, right? As a measure of whether you were healthy or not. And as I've gotten older and obviously worked with so many patients, I find quite the opposite. I don't think health is the major or weight is the major determinant of health. I think there's so many other factors that go into it. But I want to know, just because I just want to know, like when you're working with people such as, like, you've worked with Tom Cruise, Barbara Streisand. I mean, I could name so many. John Cusack, who, by the way, like Say Anything is one of my favorite movies ever. So I'm so jealous. But are they actually going through exactly what we're going through and these yo-yo dieting and self-doubt? Or are they really like eating perfectly all the time?
Oh no, yeah. They're very human. And the only difference is that they just have in most cases, they just have more money, thus they have more opportunity. That's really
Yeah.
it. I mean, when I first started, when I first got out of culinary school and I started getting my first clients, the fat flush diet was the trending book at the time. So what happens is a lot of times, the actors, because they're in that world, they get these books before they're published, or within the industry, they're all talking about something as it's just about to debut, because the agents who represent that book, they want these people talking about it and buying
Yep.
the book. So it's a very insular industry where they're the people that manage and or run whatever industry it is, whether it's book, TV, movie, modeling, doesn't matter. Those people are trying to create conversation at parties. So then that way their client or their book or their movie, starts getting word spread, organic word spread.
Yeah.
And so they're very much susceptible to the same things of like, oh, that marketing bubble of like, oh, well, fat flush, like we should be thinking about that. Or like, I remember Skinny Bitch was one that was really popular then too. And it was like everything needed to be 100 calories or less or whatever. And it was just like, including your margaritas.
The
You
wine
know,
is only a few points through Weight Watchers. Like, we should count
yeah.
that into our day. Yeah. Yeah.
But well, okay, you bring up Weight Watchers, so that's a really good point, because back in the day, and this is the thing that I never subscribed to, and I still don't. So Weight Watchers was a predominant company that pushed this message, which is it doesn't matter whether you eat an apple or a cookie, they're the same calories. So they could care less about the quality of the calorie. They just said measurement, just calorie, calorie, calorie. And I was like, from the get-go, I'm like, that does not make sense. Like the quality of the food you're eating matters so much more. Just like when we think about people, right? The quality of the person matters more than if they're skinny or fat or good looking or whatever. It's the quality is sustaining. It's always quality. It's the other stuff that's not sustainable. It's kind of like, oh yeah, you can have fun with someone who's really sexy or attractive, but like you might not really have substance, or like of course they're real people, but I mean you might not have a connection, right? You might not actually, the quality of that connection might not be there, and so it's not going to be sustainable if it's all just surface, right?
We were talking, we're talking about the quality of the food,
Yeah.
and that the Weight Watchers, it's like you had these calories and it didn't matter what the food was. And by the way, that's what I was taught when I'd walk into the modeling agency and they would say, gosh, Tricia, you need to lose 5 pounds. And, the reality of that industry at the time, in the late 80s, early 90s, that is exactly what happened. You walked in, I was 6 feet tall, I was 105, 110 pounds, and I was told, you need to lose weight, and here's how you do it. You only eat 800 calories a day. Nobody said, well, these are the right types of calories, right? Or we were buying diet foods that were processed foods put together. And I grew up in the 70s on freaking microwave dishes, like with the little apples that you heated up and the pudding and the crappy food, because that's what my parents, when they were working a ton, I was on my own a lot, right? And so it was like, well, just make yourself a meal. And when you're 8, what do you make, right? Um,
Yeah.
but it is funny because we were raised with these ideas about food and what's healthy. And what I've seen that develop into is just more and more diet fads. And as a physician, I see people saying, well, I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to follow this diet or this diet. I'm going to do it this way. And I'm very much aligned with you. And I say, well, wait a minute. Every time you put something in your mouth, what are you actually getting out of it? What is it actually doing for you? Right? Because when someone said to me, oh, I'm going to do keto. And I go, well, what do you eat? And they said, oh, I eat cheese and bacon all day. I was like, well, that's not
No.
cheese and bacon all day. How is this going to help us? Right. So I'm assuming that a lot of this came for you to recognize the value of organ meats. And I don't know if my audience will really know much about organ meats because I talk about plants so much. So I would love you to tell me, first of all, a little bit about pluck, and why should we be focusing our attention to organ meats when it comes to health?
Well, I like when I talk about this. There's a quote that I tend to probably overuse, but it floors me every time I say it. So I'll start it here, and it's from Dr. Bill Schindler. He's a professor of archaeology, specifically food archaeology, and he says we are the only species in the world that looks to someone else to tell us what to eat.
Absolutely.
Right? And if you think about it, well, there's like over 8 million species. So that's a huge discrepancy.
Yeah.
Huge. And the question then becomes, well, what happened? And of course, we can all fill that answer in, with the whole ultra processed foods, the marketing machine, all this stuff. But I think we have to go a little bit further back, which is, well, and this is what Bill kind of talks about, is like if you look back at our evolution, human evolution, the human body is basically Homo sapien. That's that kind of the realm we still are in. But that's like a 300,000-year-old realm according to this science, right? And if you go even further back, we were first foragers, okay? So first we had, before the Homo sapien body, we were foragers. We spent a long part of our day foraging to get enough calories to sustain us, because foraging and getting enough calories, as you can imagine, if you're picking berries, for example, which are clearly a low calorie food, like you need a lot to sustain yourself, let alone a whole, tribe or village. So then from foragers, we became scavengers. So now we're finding some animals that have been killed from a predator, but we're there later. And we're now getting some meat, but it's kind of like after the fact. Well, right before Homo sapien body, we became a predator. We got a rudimentary tool, and we were able to get 3 things that we never gotten before. And that was blood, organs, and fat. So these are 3 things that are incredibly nutrient dense. And what happened, we also got fire around that time. And what happened is that it changed the body that we were in to then that Homo sapien, to basically where our brains enlarged. We were able to eventually have language created. We were able to create even more tools, all the way to the point where we are now, which is you and I being able to have this conversation. So many food archaeologists will say we would not be able to be here right now in this way had we not had those 3 things: fat, blood, and organs, due to how nutrient dense they are, and how it's almost like you think about the organ meats like Mother Nature's multivitamin. It's like, I think of, like, you go to a convenience store when you're traveling or in a car and you're like feeling a little sick, and there are those packets of emergency, right near the cashier. That's what I think of when I think of organ meats. I'm like, they are like that, but in a real food. It's like power pack nutrition. Boom. It's easy for your body to absorb it. It's got everything you need that nature had intended. everything that's in a prenatal that
Yeah.
science tells us this is what you need to create life. It's all in organ meats, but it's all in the stack, the vitamin and mineral stack. It's all and it's uh, partners basically to make the most absorbable stack as it can, as Mother Nature intended. And yet, what's happening is we're not eating it here in America. You go anywhere in the U.S. or outside of the U.S. and they're eating organ meats. It's part of their culture. Mexico has menudo, which uses
Mhm.
the stomach lining among other organs. France has pâtés. Scotland's got haggis. I mean, you literally could go in Korea. They eat tons of organ meat. Same with Japan. Same with China. It's like everywhere else they're doing it, and yet here we just tend to poo poo it or feel icked out by it. And I think we're suffering for it. When we slaughter the animal, we're only using about 50% of that animal. So it's one of the most inhumane things you can do is if you're going to kill an animal, you should be using all of it. Don't waste it. And they're literally wasting about 50% of that animal, which is considered you know, the, the entrails and whatever the organs and whatnot. Um, and then what happens is we turn around and we need to supplement with capsules and laboratory made vitamins and minerals because we're nutrient deficient. And
Yeah.
it's something like 94% of America is nutrient deficient, but we're not calorie deficient.
Oh, heavens no. We have plenty of calories. And when we want to season our meat, we sprinkle seasoning salt or like all this chemical on it when we could use something like this that actually has vitamins and flavor it, right, in a way that's different. And I think it's learned patterns. I think like we're talking about what we grew up in and what we ate and what's comfort food and how can we change our diet? We don't want to change our diet. I'm not going to give up cheese, things like that. I hear that all the time. Well, I don't want to eat healthy. It's boring, but then when you look at the nutrient deficiency, right, and what we're being told to do about it, you're right. It's a ton of supplements and it's restricting food and restricting nutrition. And then we face ourselves under stress. We let stress eat us alive. I think we used to run kind of at this level of stress where every so often, we might have something major happen and we overcome it. And we've adapted our nervous systems to always be running at this higher level all the time. And we never actually relax. And half the time, much of the stuff we eat doesn't get digested because of it, because our nervous systems are running on high all of the time. So I do think this was brilliant. First of all, I think the name was brilliant. Pluck. I don't know if there's a story there, but it's freaking great. Wish I was on the marketing team for that sucker. But um, just to be able to make it so easy for people to get those nutrients in a highly absorbable form. And even myself, okay, I don't eat pluck because I just don't. I haven't had meat since I was 12. My kids do. My husband does. I do think, as you were saying earlier, you're trying to figure out what's the right food source for you, what gives you the best energy, what gives you the best nutritional status. And I believe that everybody has different microbiomes and different genetics and different environments. And for me, I have not at this point been able to tolerate meat in a way that gives me energy. Now that may change. And someday you may see me grabbing for this and sprinkling it on my broccoli, and I'll let you know when that happens. But my kids and my husband are loving it, and I think it's an easy way for people to get the value of organ meat. So thank you for making this. And you gave me some great little samples, zesty garlic and spicy mild. What's your favorite? I know you
I
have
go
one.
all over. Like I like having all three on my counter or my table, and I just follow my intuition. I mean, that's one thing
Mhm.
that I think sometimes we forget with the conversation around food is really there's two pieces to it, but it's all about being more mindful.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I think we can all get sometimes a little heady about, because the reality is like if we didn't have testing, if we didn't have all this kind of like current way of looking at nutrition and our health, we would only be able to go off of our instincts. That's it.
Yeah.
And
It's intuitive eating.
And really, that's
Yeah.
ancestrally what we did, right? Like
Yeah.
flavor historically meant nutrition. So
Yeah.
when our sensibilities, our communications around food were developing, the communication was, is this going to nourish me or kill me? I mean, it was that simple. It wasn't
Yeah.
like, is this high in fat and low in carb,
Yeah.
or
What does it
high in
taste like? Like, he
protein.
doesn't even, yeah,
There
right.
was none of that. It was just like, is this going to kill me or is this going to nourish me? And if it nourished you, you went for it, right? And so,
Absolutely.
because it was fast or famine. So, yeah, did I say that right? No, I guess it was feast or
Feast or
famine. There we
famine.
go.
Right.
Feast or famine.
Right.
Yeah. Um, so that's really key. But I think in this day and age, we have to be like you said something that's so true, and it's something I think that's really important for this conversation, which is, okay, we're talking about pivotal moments. We're talking about kind of like having faith that life will kind of deliver for your journey, and to be open, right? But where it needs to, like, not needs, but where I would love to see it transpire or materialize is in people's food choices.
Hmm.
Food choices seem to be the stickling point where people just don't want to budge. And it's like, why? Why are we holding on to these things? Like, why do we say, I love this food? Like, why do we put this kind of energy around food? And here I am, a chef, saying to people, like, maybe we should chill out, because the reality is that food is a fuel. It's something that we need to sustain our life. Like, something has to die for us to live. Like, that's just a fact, right? So if we put all these emotions that we normally reserve for people, like, I love my wife or I love my kids, right? But do you love a hamburger the same way you love them? Right? But
Right.
yet we do. We talk as though we put the same emphasis of that love towards a hamburger or towards that food as we do those people. And it's like, that's not good, because it's the connections we have as humans that at the end of the day that are going to matter the most. It's not that passion for a food or a passion for a material good. And so I really just kind of offer, like, we need to release this emotional rope that is tying us to thinking that we can't change with our food, like that it's we're dependent on it. It's like, we have to let go of the ego around that, because
Hmm.
we eat our food and then our body tells us if it's working or not. It's kind of that simple. And if you are holding on tightly to that food or the ethics or the soapbox we're on around our food, then we're going to lose sight with the communication that's happening from our body around the food we're eating. We're going to overlook it. We're not going to listen to it. Like, we're going to have skin issues, hair loss. We're going to have digestive issues. We're going to have sleep issues, and we're not going to be connecting it to the food choices. And it's like, but it is. It is connected to the food choices. And so I just caution, I just ask that we start there, which is like, just be willing to be wrong around anything you're eating. And then also, and then pretend you're wrong, and then let your body tell you if you're right.
And community. What we've also lost is the community aspect of food. And, getting together, like you were saying, you gather a bunch of stuff, you share it with the family, everyone gets together and prepares it together. You sit and you talk and you laugh. And now what we're doing is, we're eating in the car and we're grabbing something quickly and we're relying on somebody else, like you said earlier, to tell us what to eat, to buy, or to make, without really just looking at I guess I look at it from a stress standpoint, the community and the stress that we release when we share experiences with other people. And when people say they love food, I usually say, well, is it the food you love, or is it
Yeah, the
an
people you're eating it with.
emotion that you connected to it with the people you were eating it with? I have many people say, well, I can't quit alcohol. I can't do it. I love having my glass of wine. It calms me down. And I said, well, what if you took the same glass and you put sparkling water in there and you sat with the same people and you drank out of your glass with sparkling water? Do you still get that emotion of joy because you're with your friends? So is it the alcohol giving you the joy, or is it the environment giving you joy? And I think the food is connected with that. When I was sick, my mom was not home very often. She traveled a ton, right? And when I was sick as a child and she happened to be home, she would make me a grilled cheese sandwich with soup. I still to this day, if you feed me a sandwich, now granted, now it doesn't have gluten in it and it's all whole food and whatever and vegetables, but if you feed me a sandwich and soup, I get really happy, right? Because it connects me to something my mom used to do. And there's usually some sort of emotion of the environment that's connected to the food, right? When what you're saying is actually, it's just nutrition. That's what it is. So can we create new emotions around this new lifestyle of just eating whole foods? Can we love ourselves enough to realize that it's nourishment? And I do believe that we live in a society and we're raising kids in a society that doesn't have a lot of self-love.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Yeah.
We don't love ourselves. We don't feel comfortable with who we are. We're waiting for other people to tell us who we are. And, similar, when I was a kid and I went through that in the modeling world, I was like, what, 1% of the population that was subject to that scrutiny every single day of my life. But now we have social media. We're constantly, everyone is exposed to the scrutiny that I was exposed to as a young child in that industry, right? That most people didn't even get that. They couldn't even relate to me. They're like, we don't even know what you're talking about, right?
Mm.
Now I think everyone can relate to it. We're living in a world of a ton of pressure, of being like everybody else. We're losing who we are from our core. We're losing that little boy that loved to get up on stage or cook, or, we're losing those connections with our imagination and our community. And I do believe that this is causing the health decline in our country because we're losing the fundamentals of food, the fundamentals of community, of love, of support. And you had said something, it maybe was something that I read, but you were saying that your impact comes from serving. It's like
I was
you're
just going to
doing what
talk
you
about
love
that.
and
Yeah.
serving it forward, right? And I 100% believe that, because I think so many people don't live their life serving for their purpose. They take care of everybody else. They control everybody else. They control their environment, except their food, right? Can't give up on old patterns on that one, right? But we try to control and micromanage everything. And we've lost our connection with just coming from a place of love for ourselves and for others and for other humans that are different than us. I'm sitting here with somebody who believes we should eat organ meats. I don't eat them. I still love you wholeheartedly,
Mm.
right? And I appreciate what you bring to the table with that. But I think we're losing a lot of that because we're losing those meal connections. We're losing sitting down and talking to people with different viewpoints. So the chaos of the family when the uncle would come over and have these crazy ideas that everybody thought were crazy and we would laugh at them. Now we're fighting, right? I think we're turning our world into a very competitive place with lack of self-love.
I can
I don't know.
totally,
That's just my take on it.
I can totally see that. And, but where my brain goes is like, well, but how do we actually physically get out of that? Because it's one thing, of course, to talk about it, and it's harder for people to get out, just like it's harder for people to change their diets, right? It's harder to love yourself. And so I do tend to think that the easier route is to actually just don't worry about loving yourself yet, because that's really hard if you're someone who doesn't. Just focus on how can I be of service to the people around me, and just focus on how can I, like, the one thing that I say a lot when I walk into a new environment is how can I help leave this environment better than when I showed up? And so then it puts all the service, all the value that I'm trying to provide outside of me and that voice that might be self-hatred or being hard on themselves, right? Because we are our harshest critics, right? So and and I find when I do that, I feel better, and I think if we're, going back to the whole career shift and the paths we take, I think that when you do tap why you are here and what service you can offer, manifestations or these signs of like whether you're on the right path, they get brighter and louder. And I always say, like, when I was an actor, I worked so hard as an actor. I mean, so hard. And I would never just wait for someone to hire me. I was always trying to create my work. And so I say, like, well, I put out 200%. but I would get back 30%.
Yeah.
As a chef, I work hard, but it's like my normal 100%, right? But I get back 200%.
Awesome.
And it's truly, I truly believe it's because I'm now aligned with what I'm here to do. And a lot of times, like for me, the organ meats, I do believe in, in an animal-based diet. However, I also believe that we are all on our own path, and that
Yeah.
for me to project what I believe onto someone that hasn't experienced it or isn't there yet or doesn't even have, it's not even on their monitor. It's like it's not even in their zygos. That it there's no way to it, like I can never tell someone that doesn't think that way that it's a value. They have to experience their own whatever's of value for them. And so I'm always talking about like it's important for all of us to give each other the dignity of our process. And I still believe that there's one person that will never lie to you, and it's your own body, and that we always have to be listening to how our body reacts to the choices we make, and let that guide you to the next choice, not the person that's outside of you, not the harsh critic inside you, but just let your body tell you. Like, is your skin glistening? Do you look like Tricia based on your diet? Then if you do, then you're doing a good job, But if you don't, and you have blotchy skin and your dark rings in your eyes, it's like okay, well then something you're doing is not working. And let's figure that out. And hopefully you go to someone like Tricia or someone who understands and focuses on these things to support that process. But it ultimately is like your body's given us, we have signs all the time. We're just not listening. So the more we can just listen, and to your point, the other piece is to just, I really do stand behind, like, I believe at the end of our life, the thing that matters the most is whose hand we're holding, or who wants to be holding our hand. You know what I mean? Like, that is to me all that matters. And so the quality of our relationships, the quality of the community we surround ourselves with, to me is far more important than anything else. What careers we have or successes we think we get. It's like, no, it's all about like, how are you treating the people around you, and how are they treating you? And how are you
Well,
loving them, and how are they loving you?
and it's all connected. Like you said in the beginning, what if everything that happens to us, or that we think happens to us, is actually happening for us to connect all the dots to where we are, to what our legacy is. And one of the things people say, well, what's your legacy, Tricia? What do you want to leave on the world when you leave here? And my answer is always the same. And that is, when I go, I hope that someone says, wow, I'm really going to miss her. She was
Mm,
a lot of fun. She really made my day. I'm really going to miss her. That's honestly all I care about. I don't care if they say, oh, she was this great physician, or she was a model, or even that she had these amazing kids, although that's a cool backup run, right? Like, I want to have cool kids too, but just that, hey, I met Trisha once and she brought me joy. She made me think about living my life to the fullest, and I'm just so grateful for that. And I have no doubt that your legacy will be one of very similar feelings, that you brought a light and a lift to everybody that you touched, whether that was from food, whether that was from conversation. You are a light, and I'm grateful to know you. So
thank
thank you
you.
for being here and talking about so much of this. Um, Everything from food to mindset to life to experiences. And as I go out, I just have to know, what's the weirdest thing you were ever asked to make?
Oh, the weirdest. Well, I
Where
think
you were like, oh man, I don't know.
what's funnier to me is not necessarily the weirdest thing I had to make, but more the weirdest thing that happened to me while I was working with celebrities. And I'll name like a couple. One was, I was blessed. I showed up to deliver food, and the celebrity had just come back from like the rainforest, and they're with a shaman, and they're like, "Hey, can you sit on the couch? We're gonna do a whole blessing ceremony." It was just me and the assistant. Like, that was it. It was like, what? I'm supposed to get home in 15 minutes. My wife's waiting. And they're like, no, 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 it won't take that long. And I'm like, okay. And then the other one was like, I showed up to deliver food, and and suddenly I got invited into their house, and like all of a sudden I'm like, Obama had just won his second presidency, and I'm like at the celebrity's house. They invited me to stay. They only had this one other couple over who was not a celebrity. They were just like celebrity couple, and then like two regular Joes and me. And the five of us all hung out, and they had this big screen TV on, and it was like Obama was. They were saying how he won, and then like the celebrity gets a text from Obama, and I'm standing right there, and it's like, "Thank you so much for your support to help get me there." And then that celebrity starts talking to me about like what this means to to them, and I'm like, "How did I get like what?" It's like it was just such a weird moment, and they just kind of would happen like that, where I don't know why, I don't know how, and it just would happen, and I would just kind of like, to me it wasn't like something to laugh at. It was more of just like, oh, this is, I like this. I like this lifestyle of that was probably my most favorite thing about cooking for all these celebrities was, yes, the ego of like people assuming I was an amazing chef. Like that's kind of cool. But the other thing is that I had experiences that became really great party stories. And so I really enjoy being able to like look back at my life and go like, "Oh, I got to tell you about this. This was cool." You know?
Yeah, I know. I feel like I'm like the 7 degrees of of Chef James Barry. Like I could meet all these people through you. That is just, I feel blessed with that as well. Well, this has been a great conversation. I've loved having you here. I hope you had a little bit of fun while here. We dove into a lot of different topics. Um, I know that you are giving some things away. I think there's a coupon for Pluck to try Pluck. I highly encourage all of you to check out the website. I'm going to put everything here in the show notes. So you have everything you need to connect with this amazing person. I want you to follow him. I want you to learn more about Pluck because and also just more about James in general because he has a cool history. And I think we can learn a lot from you, not only in the food aspect, but also in the way that you look at life and the way that you enjoy life. And that is the lesson here is life could be short. We don't know. We don't know if this is our last day on earth. My dad did not know. My mom knew. And the regrets that she had prior were about the little things that she worried about every single day, or the little things that she took for granted, like going to the bathroom unassisted. You don't think
Mm.
about that until you can't, right? Those little things. So I would encourage all of you out there listening to remember that every single day is yours. It is yours to do with what you want. You can eat how you need to eat for your body. You can choose, you can make those choices, and you can make a choice to serve others and always lead with your heart. So thank you so much, James.